Okay, hello everyone, good evening, and welcome to the fourth and last installment in the Project Swallowtail Fall webinar series. And tonight, we're very happy to be exploring community monitoring, or in other words, how to be a hero from your computer. And with us tonight is the wonderful Ryan Godfrey from WWF-Canada. So So this webinar series is hosted through Project Swallowtail, which is a collaborative initiative in West Toronto, bringing together several individuals and environmental organizations and 350 participants. And together, we are creating and connecting habitat with a focus on swallowtail butterflies and their host plants. But of course, we're creating wildlife habitat in corridors for all species that can benefit from it in West Toronto, including human species. My name is Kathleen Law. I'm the Integrated Conservation Manager with Pollinator Partnership Canada. And tonight, I am welcoming Ryan Godfrey, who is a botanist with WWF Canada. He's also a block ambassador with Project Swallowtail and on the steering committee with myself and several other people. And Ryan is going to tell us all about community monitoring. So do you want to take it away, Ryan?
I shall. Hello to all of you. 23 participants by the looks of it. Thanks very much for coming out on this fall evening to learn a little bit about community monitoring. I wanted to start off just by saying, why did I choose that term, community monitoring? The first term that I wanted to say that kind of my brain goes to is citizen science. That's the thing that I learned about earlier on in my career, but we've switched the name, and the reason is for inclusiveness, because Project Swallowtail, our community is not necessarily just people who are existing citizens of Canada. It may also include others. So it's a broad community here. And in talking about monitoring, I also think that that's a broader term than science necessarily, possibly more inclusive. Hopefully you all feel that you are able to do the things that I'm about to show you in the next 45 minutes or so. And hopefully you're excited to do them and you feel like they will be things that will be enriching for you in this next winter season, which I know for us plant nerds can get a little dreary, but there is a lot to do. There certainly is. So I also just want to say that I really hope that this session is an interactive one. So you have the Q&A option available. So please, if you have questions about what I'm talking about, just put it in the Q&A. And if it's relevant to what I'm talking about right at that moment, then Kathleen will interrupt me. I've instructed her to do so, and I will address your question right then and there. If you have another question that isn't necessarily related to what I'm speaking about, but you want to discuss it at the end, then you put that in the Q&A as well, and we will get there within the last 15 minutes of the session. So with that, I will share my screen, because this is actually, we're not actually going to look at a slide deck here. We're actually just going to zoom around the interwebs to a bunch of different kind of websites. So let's see, screen 2. The first one that I want to talk about, hopefully we are sharing this screen. Do we see something that says My Healthy Garden Points here?
Yes,
Kathleen?
we do.
Okay, we're successful. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to stick things up on that screen as needed. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the In the Zone Garden Tracker. So this is the program In the Zone. Stick that up here. Is the project that I work for mainly at WWF Canada. And it's a program that is distributed all over the Carolinian zone, just basically the southern tip of Ontario is Canada's most biodiverse region and also the region with the most species at risk. So that's why WWF Canada and the partner organization, Carolinian Canada, got together to produce this program, which helps teach people to garden with native plants and restore habitat. Project Swallowtail is nestled right within the In the Zone program. That's how it began. That's how WWF got started with Project Swallowtail. And then we made all of these wonderful friends, including Kathleen, Pollinator Partnership, and all the rest of you folks on the call. So what I want to get to with In the Zone is our garden tracker, which is our monitoring tool. And like all of the other tools that I'm going to discuss today, it does require a sign up. So here's the little sign up button here. I'm not going to show you how to sign up, but I think everyone here on the call probably has signed up for something at some point in the past. So you will figure out how to do that. And once you get in, I'll just show you what mine looks like. So you will basically be answering a bunch of questions. I've already done that for one of my gardens. And then you get some points. So look at me, I got 110 points. Woo! For my garden. And and then you get access to a bunch of resources too. So I'll show you up here where it says garden guides. It's actually a list of a whole bunch of different resources. And we can go into these a little bit later if there is time, but these are in-depth resources that are really helpful for establishing native plant garden and stewarding those gardens. And that's really what this project is all about, is helping you and your neighbors and your friends to start getting planted, but then also to continue that stewardship for the rest of your lives. It never ends. Gardening never ends. It's true. So there's lots and lots of really great resources here. I'm going to be referring to a few of them, including this Carolinian Zone higher plant list later on, but these are all available for you to explore once you have filled out the tracker. So just go back to here and we're just gonna like go through this a little bit at a time. The purpose of the tracker is to first get a baseline idea of what your property is like, and then to add to that over time. So as you plant more plants, as you convert more area to habitat, you can track that over time. And you basically do that by answering a whole bunch of questions. And super special incentive for the evening is folks who sign up and indicate that they're signing up through Project Swallowtail will be getting garden signs. So, oh my goodness, I actually have a garden sign. Let me go get one. I'll show you what it looks like. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, and of course it's green, so it's not gonna show. Maybe it's gonna show. Oh, my sassafras. One second, I'll disable my background for a second so that you can actually see this, hopefully. Oh no, I don't think I can. Okay, maybe you can see it. It's green. It says In the Zone. It's wonderful. You can stick it in your garden. So we're gonna check our data on this, and if we see people who have signed up from Project Swallowtail specifically, and I'll show you how you do that in a little second, we will get you a garden sign. We'll get you either through your block ambassador or through someone closely associated with the program. We'll get you signs, which is pretty cool. So I'm not going to go through every single question in the tracker because there's a lot. But the important thing that you need to know about the tracker is it's not actually meant to be answered all in one big blast. You don't have to go through and in great detail answer every single question. It's not like an exam, your final exams in high school or whatever. It's meant to be something that you come back to periodically and spend a little bit of time on here and there. So my sincere recommendation for you, the first time that you're going through this, is set a timer for 15 minutes. I don't want you to spend any more than 15 minutes the first time, okay? Don't do it. It's not necessary, okay? Come back to it another time. And we've all got busy things to do, even though it's the middle of the pandemic. We can't spend hours on this kind of thing. So just do 15 minutes, and then if you feel like coming back later, you can do that. So it all starts with this page here, where you're going to be entering some information about your site in particular. And what I want to focus on is some of the really, really important stuff. So all of the data that goes into the tracker gets compiled and aggregated and helps us learn about what native plant gardeners across the Carolinian zone are doing. And one of the things that we really, really, really would like to know is the area of properties that are doing this kind of gardening. So when you look at this question here, hopefully you can see my cursor, property size. This is a really, really important one. Definitely within your first 15 minutes, I want you to do this question. And if you don't know how to get your property size, well, I will show you. I will show you with an example. So let's just zoom over to here. Bing. So Google Maps. Everyone has access to Google Maps. And right here on Google Maps, I'm going to zoom in on my community garden right here. So this is an example of a site that is part of the Project Swallowtail. So it's one of our demonstration gardens, and my plot is right here somewhere. This was a little while ago, this picture, because this site has now been turned into a big park called Garrison Crossing. But we also did some planting in these communal areas up here at the front. So this is the site, but obviously you would zoom to wherever your site is. And in order to get the area, what you can do is just right click, and then click measure distance. And then move this little dot and click somewhere else, and bada boom. That's 56 meters. And this, of course, is if you can keep clicking to make, a jaggedy line. But what you really want to do is measure just basically rectangles is what you want to do. So for the whole property, I would measure from one corner, from one corner to another corner. And then I would measure the perpendicular distance, multiply those together. You folks remember how to do geometry, I presume. So, just meters times meters gives you meters squared. That's how you can, an easy way that you can go out. You don't have to get measuring tapes involved, because some folks have taken issue with the concept of bringing out measuring tapes into their garden, which I fully understand. So you can just do it through Google Maps, and you can come back to Google Maps when later on there are questions that ask you about the area that you've planted recently. You can just come back and measure that area too. If you have an oddly shaped property, I recommend that you break it down into smaller shapes. Like rectangles are really easy to calculate. Triangles are also pretty easy to calculate because they happen to just be rectangles cut in half. So that's basically how I recommend that you answer that question. Let's go back to the tracker, and we'll keep going. And I'll show you a little bit more about what this is all about. So here in partners that connected you to In the Zone, you're seeing the results for my actual garden. So I've checked TRCA, but pollinator partnership in particular, that's the one that we want you to check off to indicate that you are coming from Project Swallowtail. So please check that one. If you happen to have been indicated through other partners, then you can do that as well. But make sure that pollinator partnership is checked. That's how you're going to get your garden sign. And then you just continue. There are a whole bunch of questions here. So again, you don't have to do all the questions. If one of these questions sounds like I don't know how to answer that, or I don't know how to answer this right now, or this is going to require me to do some thinking, then you can just skip it. You don't actually have to go through every single question. So, this first page, pretty basic, pretty easy stuff. I think you can do it. I want to focus on the second page on this question here, which is really important. Estimate the portion. I would have used the word proportion, but here it is as portion of total plants which are native plants. Now, this requires a couple of definitions. One is, what is a native plant? there are many different definitions for that, but for the purposes of this tracker, we're using the definition of the Carolinian zone plant list, which is applied by Mike Oldham. Oh my goodness, that sounds complicated. So this is a resource that I'm going to send independently. It is also available through the In the Zone website. Unfortunately, the link seems to be down at the moment, but I will just show you. This is what the resource looks like. Zoom up to the front of it. It's called the List of Vascular Plants of Ontario's Carolinian Zone, Ecoregion 7E. Wow, fancy. And by the way, this resource is fantastic and wonderful if you want to learn more about the Carolinian Zone. Oh my gosh, these pictures. Wonderful, wonderful. You can learn so much about what the Carolinian Zone is, why it's special and important, and some of the rare plants that live here. This is an important map to look at because this resource divides the Carolinian Zone into these sub-regions, and we in Toronto are part of this one that's called 7E4. Why is it called 7E4? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. 7E is the Carolinian zone. 7E4, that's just what we call this. This becomes important later on in our chart. So if we scroll down, ding, 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 we don't actually have to scroll. We could just use the search function. But here we go. Here's our list of all the plants in the Carolinian zone. And it's divided up by those regions that I just showed you. And here's 7E4. So if you wanted to know about a particular plant, here we can look for Sassafras, this wonderful plant behind me. So Sassafras is right here. I just searched it, Control F, Sassafras. Here it is. Sassafras albidum is the scientific name. The common name Sassafras is here, I think because it's highlighted right now, you can't see it, but it is in there. And if you remember, this last column here was 7E4, and there it is, it's there. It's rare, R means rare, C means common, U means uncommon, and X means they're not quite sure for whatever reason. The data didn't talk about abundance, but we know that it's there for sure. So you can see that sassafras exists all across the Carolinian zone in all of these regions. This one over here tells you about its commonness or rarity across the whole Carolinian zone, so pretty common. And this column tells you whether it's endemic to the Carolinian zone. So that means whether it's just there. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked a little bit. This is a very exciting document for me. So it is endemic. So that's pretty cool. So sassafras is native to the Carolinian zone. So this is the resource that I'm recommending to you to figure out whether a plant is native to the Carolinian zone. Again, check out in this leftmost column. And you can also check if it's native to your particular region of the Carolinian zone. There are a few of these things, if it's native all the way across, you're probably safe. If there's some that are, you're only getting, it's only just in a few of these things and it's not in 7E4, you might want to consider, should this be planted in Toronto or not? I'm not going to answer that question. That's not the purpose of this particular conversation unless we want to get there at the end. But lots and lots and lots of really interesting information in this document. I'll also say that the blue lines, these sort of bluey purpley ones with the IR or IX, those are introduced species, so non-native species. And the red ones are rare species, rare protected species. And also the bolded ones are kind of rare, but not protected, okay? So very, very cool resource there that I hope some of you in the chat will want to look at in great detail. So let's return to this idea of the portion of total plants which are native. So now we have a concept of what is a native plant and what is not a native plant. And we want to know, okay, what does this mean proportion? Great question. There are a bunch of different ways of answering that. In discussing with my team earlier today, we decided that the definition that we're going to use here for for our purposes is area. So basically, you're going to take your whole property, your whole garden area where plants are, and ask yourself if you were to smush all the native plants to one side and all the non-native plants to the other side, and counted up the area, the total area of your native plants versus the total, what would it be? So for here, this was my balcony garden actually, which you may have seen in a prior video webinar. Uh, so my balcony container garden, I said, was 9 out of 10 native. So that means if it was, so all that area squished, it's mostly native plants, and there's only a little bit of non-native plants in there, which is pretty accurate for my case. Again, don't get super hung up on the details here. It's divided up. You only have a choice between these 10 percentile categories. So don't like fret over it. Over like a 7 or an 8, a 5 or a 4. Don't spend a lot of time on it. Just imagine in your brain and go do it. So that's what we want to talk about, that area. Okay. There are different ways of thinking about it too. You could think about the proportion of species which are native. You could think about the proportion of biomass which are native plants, and those are important questions for different applications. But just keep in mind, for this purpose, we're talking about area.
Ryan,
Yes,
can I throw in a question?
absolutely.
So on the question of proportion, someone is asking, they're saying they have a very different front and backyard.
hmm
Um, if it's 90% in the front and 20% of the back,
hmm
how should they report that? And then a follow-up question, which is a little broader, but directly related to in the zone tracker, is there a way to enter more than one garden
hmm
into the system?
Yes, yes. Okay, great questions. Thanks for that, Kathleen. Um, so to the first question, because we're on the same property, we're going to enter this as the same property if it's just front yard and backyard. I would sort of average it out, basically. So you're considering it to be, one property, and you're considering all the native plants and all the non-native plants on the entire property. So basically you average it out in your brain. When you do that mental calculation, you're basically going to be squishing all the native plants from the backyard into the front yard, and all the non-native plants from the front yard into the backyard, or however you want to do it in your brain, so you figure it out. So if you're like 80-20, then that's probably going to end up being like a 5 out of 10 total, something like that. um, is how I would answer that. And then the second question about multiple properties, yes, it is possible to do multiple properties. And basically what you do is you go through let's just backtrack here a little bit, go through the whole thing for your first property, and then when you go through again, so when you go through again, this question here says whether you're filling the tracker out again and you're updating. And if that's the case, then down here, you're going to be choosing your property. So this is the one that I'd already entered. And if you want to do a new one, then you click no, this is my first time filling out the quick start tracker for this property. And then you start your second property and you go through it that way. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Okay. Hopefully that question was answered. Okay. So we'll just get back to where we were. Portion. Okay. So that's talking about this proportionality question. And then we have a question about the number of different native plant species. Again, if you know that, wonderful. If not, that's okay. You've got some learning to do. One of the questions that I'm sure some people have is what if I just don't know the plants on my property? There is a bunch of plants and I don't know whether they're native or not because I don't even know what they're called yet. Wonderful. Go to school, get your master's degree, become a botanist. No, that's the long and hard way of doing it. The easy way that I'm going to teach you next is to use iNaturalist. Okay, so we're going to use iNaturalist to identify our plants. And it really is easy, folks, easy peasy. So here in this next area, what did you plant? If you click yes, that means that you have planted since your last entry. So if you've done your baseline, or maybe you're entering because you just planted and you want to indicate those plants that you just planted. Maybe you got some plants from our plant sale, or maybe a neighbor just dug some plants up and shared them with you, and you want to enter those. So you click yes. Again, the really important thing here that I wanted to draw people's attention to is the size. That's the area. The area measures in this tracker are really important. Um, area and proportion are the two things that I want you to spend that 15 minutes doing. So here, to go back to my example here of the community garden, we planted um, we planted some native plants in this area here. That's where we planted the new plants. Prior to that, it was kind of some cultural plants, some non-native species and whatnot, and we planted a bunch of native plants in this area. So that would be the area that I would measure to answer that question, if that makes sense. So you're not talking about individual plants, you're just talking about the area that was covered. And if you sort of interspersed your plants through some non-native plants, then squish it, in your mind. Again, squish them together and imagine if they were all together, what would that look like? Okay, we shall continue. We shall continue. And then we're going to move on to the next one pretty soon. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is habitat. Okay, so the term habitat comes up in this document a number of times, and that's also a bit of a brain teaser. Um, what is a habitat? What counts as habitat? What doesn't count as habitat? Interesting question. Bit of a wormhole. What I'm going to do is send you another resource, which I think is really useful for this, which is called dun, 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 the Wildlife Action Plan. So this is another thing that you can fill out on your own. I think it's actually a pretty valuable tool for you to visualize and set goals for your garden, but it will also help you calculate this habitat thing based on what we're saying. So the first thing that it asks you to do is a property sketch here. I haven't put in a property sketch. You could equally just take a screen capture from Google Maps if you wanted to do that and put it in here, and then you can draw your lines and stuff later on. But the important part here is what they have you do is divide up your property into 5 different sections. So aquatic, natural, cultural, soft, and hard. Um, I'm imagining that most of you in Toronto do not have aquatic habitat, but if you do, I'm very impressed. That's really, really cool. Maybe you have a rain garden. Maybe you have a backyard pond. Actually, Colleen is in the call and she has a backyard pond, so that would count as aquatic. Natural areas are areas that are left wild, undisturbed, and mostly have native ground cover too. Okay, so actually probably not a whole lot of that in Toronto, to be honest. If you may be lucky if you have some forest area or something like that. I'm imagining that most of you folks have cultural. Your green areas are probably cultural. So those are your gardens, hedgerows, fields, roadsides. Okay, that's what we call cultural area. And together, the aquatic, natural, and cultural areas will give you those are the ones that we're counting as habitat. So then the soft and the hard areas, so soft areas include lawn, gravel, wood chips, so areas where lawn may be growing, but otherwise no other plants are growing. So it's permeable, so water will soak in, but we're not counting that as habitat. Now, interesting question. What if you're doing a naturalized lawn? What if you're doing a lawn that has strawberries and violets and pussy toes and hawkweed? Maybe you're leaving your dandelions, things like that. At that point, I think that bumps it up into the cultural area. I would say that if you're doing that, a sort of polyculture lawn, you can then count that as cultural and you can count it in your habitat. You heard it here first, folks. Um, and then finally, the last category is hard. So this would include your house, for example, unless you have like a green roof, for example, in which case, again, you might be able to count that as cultural. Paved areas, your driveway, paving, that kind of stuff. So the idea is, again, to sort of, I'll go back to my example here. Take your garden area and divide it up into what's paved. So here, like most of this is probably going to end up being hard, which is going to be the paved area. And then I would actually say the rest of this, since it's these are all gardens, they're community garden plots, so they're growing some kind of plants, whether they're native or non-native, they count as cultural. So that would go into the cultural area, and that's how we calculate habitat. Okay, hopefully that answers that question. And again, you're entering the entire proportion. So here I put a 4 out of 10. This is again for my balcony because I have containers, but most of my balcony is paved, is just a big slab of concrete that I sit on and that the containers sit on, and the containers fill up about 40% of that. So that's why I put 4. Okay, the final thing, and then we'll move on to the next thing, is connectivity. I would really love for you in Project Swallowtail, because that's what this thing is all about, connectivity, to look at and answer the questions around connectivity. So um, so the for example, this question: what portion of the surrounding areas have gardens, trees, et cetera, versus sort of roads, parking lots, that kind of stuff. And in particular, this is also sort of it's not a hard and fast thing. We haven't actually told you how far out you need to go. Is it a 100-meter buffer around your property, or is it a 10-meter buffer? We didn't really say that. So it's kind of a just think about it kind of idea. But also what I want you to think about in this is, are you connected to other Project Swallowtail gardens or areas? And how many of those, at what proportion, etc. So that's really it. Again, don't get hung up on details too much. Answer it as best you can. If a question seems boring or too time consuming, then skip it. Just keep going. You just keep going through, etc., etc. Get to eventually you get to some of the questions are really simple and some of them take a little bit more time. Then you get to the end, and because this is a continuation, mine just says save draft, but yours is going to say submit tracker, and make sure you click submit tracker. Doesn't matter, again, doesn't matter how many questions you answered. I just want you to do that after 15 minutes of playing around. Click that, you'll get your garden sign, and you'll get access to all those resources and whatnot. So that's it. That's the garden tracker. You can come back later, you can add extra properties, all of that. If anyone has questions about the garden tracker specifically, Kathleen, if there are any in there in the chat, I'm happy to take those now, or else we can move on to the next thing, which will be iNaturalist.
So we do have one question about the proportions, estimating proportions in the tracker. So if 50% of a house, does that mean that the max garden is 50%?
If 50% of the property is the house, is that?
If 50% is a house, does that?
Oh, yeah.
If 50% of a property is a house, does that mean the max garden is 50%?
Correct. Yes, for your property, that's true. So the house is going to count as hard landscape unless you do your roof. Again, if there's some way for you to get plants on your roof, then that's how that works. But yeah, that's okay. And again, like there's nothing wrong with that either. You know, we live in an urban place. We don't have as much space to grow as maybe someone who lives in a rural area and just has hectares and hectares of forest and old field and things like that. So it's okay if you only have 50% of your property that is plantable, just do your best. So yes, but to answer your question, you are thinking about it correctly. Okay, so with that, I will move on to the next thing, which is iNaturalist. So let me go to ding 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 here. So iNaturalist, if you don't already know about iNaturalist, I've already logged on again. So this first page that I'm going to show you, you don't have to log on to see this. But what this is we're not actually directly affiliated with with iNaturalist, but it's just an open thing that anybody can do. And I really, really encourage everyone to do this. You will get so much out of it too, because you can learn from iNaturalist so many things. So all of these little points, let's zoom in on Toronto. All these little points, oh my gosh, look at them all, are observations that people, just like you, have made by taking photos and uploading them to iNaturalist. So these are some of those examples. Um, and again, like we can look at sassafras. Let's look at sassafras. So let's look for sassafras here. So not that many people have actually observed sassafras, and most of them in our project area have been observed right here in High Park. Let's take a look at one of those. So let's look at this. Why not? So this person, this is their name. um, this is their photo. You can learn some more about them. But the cool thing is, so this person, when they first took this photo and uploaded it, they suggested that it was sassafras. Um, and then another person came along and said, yeah, I actually agree. I think it's sassafras too. And if three people independently agree on what the organism is, and this isn't just plants, by the way, folks, this is also animals, insects, birds, anything. Um, if three people independently agree, then it becomes what's called research grade. And research grade means that scientists can go into this database, take those research grade observations out, and they can use that information to do academic research papers and publications, which is really, really cool. The other thing that is really cool about this is you have the option to license your photos. So this person um, has done a some rights reserved Creative Commons license. So that means it's usable under certain conditions. So if you credit Suzanne um, in this special kind of way, you can actually use this photo. And I've used photos from iNaturalist in presentations before, so you can sort of get credited in all over the place if you put your photos up on iNaturalist. So that's another reason to do it. But the main reason that I think you should use iNaturalist is to learn what a plant is based on a photo, or learn anything. So I'll show you how to do that once you oh, I want to show you one more thing, which I thought was really, really cool. So go into my observations. So I want to show you this one, this most recent one. I'm Botanical Ryan here. Oh, that's not what I wanted to show you. Let's go to my dashboard quickly. So I took this photo a little while ago in Trinity Bellwoods of, I know it's hard to tell, it just looks like a leaf, but if I zoom in on it, there's a dragonfly there. So I saw this little dragonfly while I was sitting in the park with a friend, having a chat, and it landed on this leaf, and I took a picture. I had no idea what this dragonfly was, not the first clue. Just didn't, I don't know dragonflies. I don't hardly know anything about them. I know maybe two species that I can identify off the top of my head. So I just took this picture, I uploaded it to iNaturalist, and I will show you what happened first was, well, I just put it here. I said it's a dragonfly. I'm pretty sure it's a dragonfly, but I don't know anything beyond that. Very quickly, within the next like 48 hours, two people came in and identified it for me and told me that this is an autumn meadowhawk. How cool is that? And then not only that, but you can see now other people who have indicated the presence of autumn meadowhawks. So actually you can see mine here in Trinity Bellwoods is like the first in almost in its whole area. And there's a few in High Park, there's a few up here. So you can really add to a database here. You can also see, you know, these you're improving the community by doing this kind of thing. So I just think that's really, really cool that I with my phone was just sitting in the park and I got to learn a new species, and I also got to contribute to a big database. So I want to show you how we do that. So very, very quickly and simply, really, you just click upload. You can also do all of this on your phone, by the way, but it's a little bit harder to show. I usually do it on my phone though. So there it is. And then we don't know what this is yet. So we're going to click species name, and this is where the magic happens, folks. A computer algorithm of immense intelligence goes in and figures it out. And usually it's pretty darn good. So Spikenard thinks it's Aralia. And then the first one that comes up is Aralia californica. Now, that sounds a little weird to me because I don't live in California. The next one, Aralia nudicalis. Ooh, that sounds possible. So you can take a look at it. You can take a look at Aralia nudicalis. What does it look like? Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's what the leaf looks like. This is when it does its thing. It's most often viewed here at this time. Okay, it flowers around this. And then you can basically sort of decide. You can make kind of a guess. Doesn't really matter whether you're right or wrong though. Or you can just click this if you want to. Spikenards. So let's just do that. Let's say I don't actually know. I don't know whether it's ginseng or devil's walking stick or California spikenard. So I'm just going to say I think it's this. You can add your location. If you want, a whole map comes up. Bam, bam, bam. Stick that location in. Sometimes that comes directly from your camera, sometimes not. You can add notes. I found this, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Anything you want to add. And then you just submit the observation. I'm not going to click submit because I don't remember where this photo came from. But after it does that, it goes up to the community. Someone comes along, says, hey, I think it's this, I think it's that, da 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 da. You have this lovely conversation back and forth, and bada boom, you figure out what the heck that plant was. So this is what I recommend that you do for every single plant on your property. If you don't know what it is, just do what I just told you, and you will learn. This is the
Awesome.
modern world.
It's so impressive. Ryan, could you answer the question of whether iNaturalist, sorry, uses biometrics like the similar app PlantNet?
PlantNet. I have used PlantNet a long, long time ago. Um, I'm not 100% sure what the term biometrics means, so I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to answer that question, but it is very similar. So it uses basically an algorithm that looks at a whole bunch of photos that look similar, and then it also uses the data. So it's a training algorithm, a training data set is what it's called. So they take a whole bunch of photos that have been identified by specialists, um, and then looks at a new photo and says, where does this fit into my data set? It's fancy computer stuff, folks. I don't really honestly know how it works, but I'll tell you, it works. It works a remarkable proportion of the time. And when it doesn't work, someone else in the community, a human being, will come in and fix it for you. 9 times out of 10, actually 10 times out of 10 so far. Are there any other questions about iNaturalist? Otherwise, I will,
One,
yeah.
yes, one more question. So someone is wondering, or uh, is looking for confirmation that if we're observing a plant that's in a garden and posting it to iNaturalist, that we should be checking captive or cultivated as an
Mm-hmm.
option.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that it's not confused with plants in natural areas. Is that
Great.
correct?
Yes, great point. Yes, that's true. So interestingly, this gets a little bit fuzzy in the work that we're doing because we are planting native plants. We're planting them in areas where they should be located. But yes, if you bought the plant, and you shouldn't be digging up plants from the wild. So if you bought the plant and you put it in the ground, or if you suspect that it was planted in a garden, you should click captive cultivated. If you're not entirely sure, that's okay too. It's not a huge deal. They are very much aware on this platform that plants bend the boundaries of what's captive and what's not. Whereas if you're looking at birds, like it's pretty obvious. If you're looking at a parrot or something, that's not that would be a captive thing. So so yes, but in general, gardens you should click that thing. Hmm. Any other questions about that or about INAT in general?
Yeah, so about iNaturalist specifically, and even more specifically about Project Swallowtail,
Hmm.
can you tag Project Swallowtail, quote
Aha,
unquote, tag Project Swallowtail in iNaturalist?
you absolutely can. So yeah, this is maybe okay. Yeah, no, let's do this. Let's do this. We'll get out of here. So one of the other things that iNaturalist has are projects. which are basically umbrellas or little sort of like tags that that you can mark your um, your observations with. And you can also do this after the fact, so it's no big deal. But if I go into projects and I type project Swallowtail, ding, there it is. There we are, folks, project Swallowtail. So you can go to project Swallowtail. You can, I've already followed, so that's why it says leave here. And there's only 17 people in this group, folks. So let's see that number go up after, right after this, okay? Um, and then here are the various things that have been indicated. So Project Swallowtail, basically, it's an area-based thing. So we're seeing observations within our Project Swallowtail area, is I believe how this worked. I think Clement set this up actually, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it is Clement Kent, who is a Project Swallowtail Block ambassador and member of the steering committee, and also a retired professor from York University who studied pollinators.
Absolutely. So I recommend you can do that. Fact is, the Project Swallowtail project is it's already if you're making any observations within the Project Swallowtail area, they're already getting captured in this, but you're just not part of the club. So you should join the club first. um, and there's obviously there's a lot more to all of these things. I'm just scratching the surface. But hopefully, are there any other questions about iNaturalist specifically?
No more iNaturalist specific questions, but we do have some good ones for the Q&A when you're ready.
Okay, I just have the quickest thing to show people that I'm very excited about, and then we'll get to Q&A. The thing is this. Oh my gosh, planting a wildlife garden. So this is the resource that I've most recently done. I'm quite excited about it. Um, this is a brochure that we're going to have available at garden centers that sell native plants. And the whole purpose of this brochure is to help people choose the right native plants for their area. And it all centers around this table here. And basically what it's all about is based on your area. So like that garden that I was showing you earlier, it is a woody garden, the one at the community garden. The one over to the left of that is a woody garden, and it's kind of full shade and dry. So with just that information, shady, full shade, and dry, I just go over to here and I can see right here some wonderful plants that I can grow in that garden. So we've really picked the easiest to grow plants for each of these habitat types. And we have all of these different habitat types. And on top of that, we have the reference ecosystem that it most closely resembles. We have a bunch of wildlife that you can look at in that habitat once you get to that point. And we also have the natural sort of benefits that you get out of a garden of that type. So we're hoping that this is a resource that will be broadly applicable to lots of different types of people, and it will help them pick the right plants for their garden. And this resource will also be available in that resources section after you fill out the tracker. And we're just doing the last little tweaks on it, and it's going to be available like next week. So you'll be able to, this is your sneak peek, but as of next week, once you fill out the tracker, you'll be able to take a look at that. So I hope you all enjoy it as much as I enjoyed making it. Okay, and with that, let's go to Q&A. I will stop sharing screen.
Oh, that's great. What a wonderful introduction to the In the Zone tracker, to iNaturalist, and to this beautiful brochure. Congratulations, that's looking really good. And it'll be a great addition to the native plant options at nurseries across the Carolinian zone.
Totally. And I should say that now that we've got this formula sort of down for this table, we want to actually replicate it across Canada. So maybe the next one will be for Halifax. That's where Kathleen is right now.
Oh, yeah, that's funny. I had the same idea. I was like, I think this is broadly applicable at a regional
Absolutely.
scale. Um,
Absolutely.
okay, so we do have some great questions, but actually one that I'm really excited to ask you is, why are we making these observations?
Oh yeah.
And how is this data being used? And who's using it in the end?
Okay. Yeah. Great question. I sort of skipped over at the beginning the why, but
Keeping the punchline for the end.
right, that's important. Um, so Project Swallowtail is a special thing, and it's about way more than just putting plants in the ground. We want to actually transform you folks in who are present in this webinar and everyone else who's involved into super stewards. So we want you to know the plants, we want you to observe the plants, we want you to care for the plants and spread the plants and all of that. So every activity that you do that brings you closer um, in relationship with your plants and with your wildlife, we think will help just deepen this network. So this is why we are doing these stewardship type um, activities. So including, right, Kathleen, you've got the pollinator steward training coming up over the winter. That's another way that we're helping people just to deepen their relationship with their garden, with their plants, with their wildlife, with their natural areas, all of that. So partly it's for you to just level up in your naturalist experience. So that's number one. Number two is you asked what are other people doing with the data. So obviously it's a reciprocal thing here, right? So you're getting something out of it, but also in the case of the In the Zone Garden Tracker, we are actually learning. We in the zone, so that's WWF and Carolinian Canada together, are learning about the cumulative impact of native plant gardeners all throughout the Carolinian zone. And I have to say right now, Toronto is a little bit underrepresented in our data set. So we would love to fill that because we know that there's native plant gardeners. We know that there's habitats growing in gardens all across the city, and especially in Project Swallowtail area because we've been working so hard on that. And we want that to be represented in our data set so that we can show off. That's basically what it's all about. So we can say we are making this positive transformational change. To create a better future for people and wildlife together. That's what it's all about. We want to track that change. We want to report it. We want to tell people this is happening. It's worth getting on board with. So that's what that's all about. For iNaturalist, I told you a little bit about those research grade observations, which are actually used by researchers. So I'm not joking about this, folks. Real, real life scientists at like big fancy universities go into iNat and pull out data. They will actually pull your observations. You may be the person who observes the northernmost observation of autumn meadowhawk, or the latest observation, or maybe it becomes part of a data set that informs, how we understand how autumn meadowhawks are moving in response to climate change. So all of those kind of fancy questions that scientists are asking, they need data to answer those questions. And you, by making observations on iNaturalist, are providing that data. How cool is that? You don't even have to go to university. You can just whip out your phone and be part of science. So I think that's really cool. I think that's worthwhile just in and of itself. But as I hope I've told you, you also get this added benefit of, in the case of iNaturalist, you get to learn about the plants and animals around you that you may not already know. And in the case of the In the Zone tracker, you get access to all of these resources and a garden sign. Oh, you still can't see it. You get a garden sign too. I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, it did. Thanks, Ryan. Um, and I would also add, as you said, we've looked at a lot of the browser versions of these databases, but they're also available as apps. So you can be out in the field on a hike, in the middle of a city park, and make those observations right there and then.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely. And I'll say iNat, I mostly use it on my phone. I mostly just take pictures on my phone. And then the phone app, believe it or not, folks, is even easier than the web app that I just showed you. It's so simple, like literally 3 clicks, bam, 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 and you figured the thing out.
yeah. And speaking also to the broader question of why why this is all happening, some of the benefits that come out of these massive monitoring efforts. We've learned from these contributions from everyday people about new butterfly ranges. It's expanded our understanding of where we can find certain species, where they are, and when. And this is fascinating. This is like real-time data that allows us to draw a better understanding of what's happening in the world around us.
Absolutely. Actually, I just will take a quick minute. I know we have 14 more questions and we don't want to go over time, but you reminded me, Kathleen, that I actually made an observation of a giant swallowtail butterfly. I posted it to iNaturalist, and it turned out that it is actually one of the most northern observations on the whole platform. So we already know about swallowtails, particularly the zebra and the spice bush and the giant, that they are moving north in response to climate change. And we, right here, we in Project Swallowtail, we're the people who could observe that change happening right now. How cool is that? We could actually, I mean, I think that's special. I think that's really cool.
I agree. Oh, and someone is asking us also to address whether there are other apps that are specialized in certain taxa. For example, I'm thinking of eBird, eButterfly.
Hmm.
Um, those are significant ones.
Those are
There's also
great.
Bumblebee Watch.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, we
Yeah.
really only just scratched the surface here, didn't we? Those are all wonderful, wonderful. You know what? When I send the resources to folks, there's those two documents that I said I was going to send. Why don't we send along a couple of other of those examples to folks as well? If you happen to be really into reptiles and amphibians, there's also the Ontario Reptile Atlas. And that's a really fun one because there's not all that many reptiles and amphibians. You can learn them pretty quick. And kids really happen to love frogs and turtles. So that's a fun one to go out with
Uh,
your kids or your nieces and nephews. Yeah.
that's a great suggestion. Oh, I love this next question we have, which is, what is a block ambassador? If we're talking about Project Swallowtail, Brian, tell us, what is a block ambassador?
Well, block ambassadors are basically our super volunteers. So they're the people who we love. We love them so much, and we shower them with gifts because they are people who are making a really honorable choice to spend an extra amount of time and go a little bit above and beyond. And in particular, they are helping us to recruit more people into Project Swallowtail. So um, they're using their social networks. They are socially distancing while maybe talking over the fence to their neighbors. Hey, would you like to join Project Swallowtail? That kind of thing. So they've made a commitment to try to bring in around, let's say, 10 other people to the project. If they only do 5 people, I'm still really happy about that. And if they do 20, I'll invite them out for a drink. Would you like to add anything to that, Kathleen, or did I basically get it?
No, so you've added so much, including a bribe, I think. But um, I I mean, yes, block ambassadors. What to say? They're particularly enthusiastic and engaged participants in Project Swallowtail, and that can look like so many things. We have some veteran horticulturists or professional horticulturists, master gardeners, lots of people who have a lot of plant experience, and people who are totally new to gardening or might not even have a personal garden but are getting involved in a community garden. Um, we have teachers, we have youth, we have people from all over West Toronto, and we're definitely looking to make this a huge tent and have as many people involved and as many gardens involved.
Wonderful. I see
Um,
there's still 14 questions left, and it's right at 8
yes.
o'clock now.
Well,
I'm I'm happy to stick around for a little while longer and answer questions if folks in the audience are. I don't know if you're able to, Kathleen.
yeah, absolutely. I will say that a few of these questions are comments, and they're
Okay.
things like "so cool."
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. You're so cool.
So let's see. How about? Oh, this is an interesting one. Um, So someone named Christy is saying, I have an obsession with green connectivity, but safe connectivity for wildlife. It would be so great to advocate for safe passage for land mammals in cities between green spaces, because if we create them, they will come, but they need protection too in cities. Would it be great to do this, save underpass and overpass? I know this is next level, but when we invite them, we could protect them too.
This is really interesting. So you're talking about a biophilic city, basically, is what it sounds like to me. It sounds like you're talking about what if we actually considered our infrastructure in the city to be not just for human animals, but non-human animals too, our relatives. And I'm all for it. I think it's great. I think we're close to it as well. One thing that I know we're fighting for is to have the Toronto biodiversity strategy, which is a quite a fulsome document if you've looked at it. It does include um, provisions for things like this, but it mostly is active in Toronto's ravine system. And if you want to talk to your city councillor, or if you want to talk to the mayor, or tweet at the mayor, if that's your method of choice, one thing that you can say is we want the biodiversity strategy to be in effect all across the city. So not just in the ravines, but between the ravines as well, where people live, where there are streets, where there are buildings, where there are shops, where there are parks. And if that were really true, then this would be obvious. It would be necessary. We would have to build underpasses and overpasses and all sorts of corridors for mammals. It would just that would be a priority, I think. So that's my recommendation. Kathleen, do you want to add anything to that?
Oh, I think, well, I love the use of the term of a biophilic city. That's a vision I'm on board with, absolutely. I did want to mention one citizen science or community monitoring tool that's actually co-produced by Pollinator Partnership, and I totally forgot to mention it when we were talking about the different tools. So I'll just quickly share my screen here. So this is the Insight app. So if you look up Insight Citizen, unfortunately right now it's only available as an iOS app. We'd love to make it available for Android systems as well. But the thing that's really interesting about this one is it is pollinator specific. But instead of observing it per species, which can be a bit difficult to do unless you have the computing power of iNaturalist, what you do is observations of plant pollinator interactions in a given area for a certain amount of time. And so that allows us to analyze changes in population over time, which is not quite the same as making presence or absence observations of specific species. So this one is something I wanted to share. That's also a fun one to use. And yeah, I think that's it on my end for those additions.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, why don't we go in? I'm just looking at some more questions. Who's using this information? Why? So cool. Birds, reptiles, and amphibians. So we have different kinds of things. Can you tag in the zone in Project Swallow or in iNaturalist? Don't think In the Zone actually has an iNaturalist group yet. So I think the answer to that is no. It's not necessary to do that. Janet says the whole quantifying concept is beyond awesome, making statistical analysis. Wow, it's hard for my tongue to say. And conclusion drawing. Yes, absolutely. What else do I see here? Do you need to report birds to both eBird and iNaturalist? I'm actually not a birder, so I don't know if they're connected. Are they connected in some way? I don't know the answer to that question.
Neither do I, actually.
Is Project Swallowtail going to expand outside West Toronto eventually? Adam from NAMPS. That's an interesting question, isn't it? um, I will just say that I would love for it to expand beyond West Toronto. Our idea was always to use West Toronto as our special little laboratory to learn how to do this, because the cool thing about this is nobody else is doing it. It's what we're doing here is unique and special, and we're learning for the very first time, and we've learned so much thanks to our participants. But it's not unique to West Toronto. Of course, this concept, native plant gardening and community engagement, sort of knitted together, could happen anywhere. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Kathleen, but there are a couple of ideas that we have in the works that I don't know if we're ready to share those.
Well, I know it's certainly part of our vision. Well, me personally, and Pollinator Partnership Canada as well. And I know many people on the steering committee are also interested in sharing this great model. And as you said, there is something very unique about the combination of community engagement, and this really is about neighbors speaking to neighbors and friends speaking to friends and making those human connections. And I think that's a huge part of what makes a project like this sustainable, because it could look like different things in different places and have different focus from one ecosystem or ecozone to another. And I think that's part of its strength, is it's really adaptable and it is collective, and it's really, Project Swallowtail is about creating a space where people can come together and be supporting in making positive change happen, in particular by rewilding our cities, rewilding our areas, protecting biodiversity. So yeah, I think I'm happy to see something like this spread far and wide.
Yeah, yeah, and as you say too, Kathleen, I could see different areas choosing a different project title, for example. So swallowtails are the thing that we thought was a fun thing to sort of focus on, but I could see a project dragonfly, I could see a project firefly, I could see a project eagle. I don't know, like anywhere, wherever it is, whatever is the particular taxon or cause that is able to focus people together on to take action. I could see a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, exactly. And another one, another thing that I think makes a lot of sense to pull into a model like this is climate change, because as we all know, it is I would venture to say, the overarching environmental issue of our time, and beyond just an environmental issue. And the thing about something like Project Swallowtail, where we help each other plant native plants, increase the biodiversity and the amount of plant species and other species in our areas, um, the more, those actions, they're concrete, they're tangible. You can see the effects of those actions by seeing it. Like a few years ago, the back corner of my garden was a literal garbage dump. It's like it's nestled between a couple parking lots and an old church and someone else's garden and a dilapidated shed. And there's just a pile of garbage full of invasive species, goutweed, knotweed, garlic mustard, all kinds of things. And I planted it last November with plugs of native plants, and this summer it was incredible. We had over 20 species of flowering plants, and I think over 80 different species of insects of all kinds, pollinators, bees, wasps, beetles, just flies, midges, all kinds of things. And it's really tangible. Um, and in response to climate change, I think it's one of those things that an action that we can pose that we can see the direct effects. It's empowering, especially in the face of something as huge as climate change.
Absolutely, agreed. It's a beautiful little garbage dump area now, I must say, having seen it. Yeah, yeah, that's great. Okay, well, does it look like we've answered all or most of these questions? There's some wonderful comments in here as well. Pete um, references the Christmas bird count as the the longest running community-based monitoring or citizen science initiative. Totally agreed. Those birders are huge nerds, and I'm a little jealous of it. I wish that there were more plant nerds out there. Maybe we'll get them through this project. Who knows? Maybe we'll start to rival the Christmas bird count. Yeah. So I guess if that's it, shall we thank our audience for sticking around a little extra?
Yes, you will. And I'll also actually just share my screen one last time to give people a little reference as we close off. So for anyone who's interested to learn more about Project Swallowtail specifically, projectswallowtail.ca, that's also where you can register and get in touch with us with the project and learn more about that. And also I want to say thank you, Ryan, especially for this wonderful, wonderful presentation, really a tour through the different citizen science or community monitoring, tools that there are. And it's just been very informative, of course. And I think really helpful to see what it actually looks like once you're inside the app. And can people contact you if they have any questions about In the Zone specifically, or where should they go for questions for In the Zone?
Yeah, if you have specific in the zone questions, or if you just want to reach out to me for any reason at all, I love hearing from Project Swallowtail folks. And my email address is rgodfrey@wwf-Canada.org. So that is how you can get in touch with me, and I would welcome your messages. And yeah, my parting thought to all of you is you can do it. It's not that difficult. You can level up your naturalist experience through these various tools. Take the time that you need. We've got all winter, folks. It's going to be a long winter, and I promise you, you can learn how to do all of this kind of stuff, and you can learn all sorts of other things right from your computer or phone. How marvelous is that? We're living in the future. That's all I have to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. And thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight. And thank you.